Joe,
This,
I think it
yeah,
was me. Yeah, I'm
are
recording
you the
now.
host?
I think
Are
it
you
was me.
recording?
Yeah.
Okay, then
Let
you've got
let
to give me the recording.
let me. I'll give you back the recording power. Let me see. Yes, recording now. Yeah, you can start over again, I think. Recording. Yes.
It's still asking permission. Recording. Are you recording?
I'm recording from here. Yes. Do you
Okay,
want?
that's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
No, you can send me the recording later. Okay, então, sejam bem-vindos. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to hand over to Miriam to say a couple of words before she heads off to get the jab in the arm.
Thank you, Joe. I'd like to say welcome, everybody. Today is the second meeting we have together in the very beginning of collaboration. We hope will be a long-term one, sustainable, and a win-win partnership between Brazilian and US university. It's a pleasure to have Dr. Dimandi here with us and to expand our understanding of literacies from transnational perspectives. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Dr. Dimandi. Thank you, Joe. Dr. Window. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Miriam. On the move there, in the car, live action scenes, ao vivo. A Miriam está indo se vacinar, né? Para quem chegou agora, uma boa notícia. Ela está lá no Texas, né? Demande, I'm going to hand over to you. So there are 21 people here with us at the moment. I'm not sure if you want to, I'll hand it over to you, up to you now.
Okay. Should I just say potache? Potache. I want to say thank you to Professor Miriam George for that nice introduction. I hope I pronounce your last name correctly, Professor George. Thank you so much. Say please.
Oh, yes, it's correct. Thank you.
Oh, okay, okay. I have to practice how to say Brazilian last name because it is actually appropriate to get to pronounce people's identities correctly. So if I happen to pronounce your name incorrectly, please let me know. But again, potage, and thanks to you, Professor Jauger, and to Professor Windle. And I want to appreciate the Center for Critical Studies in Language, Education, and Society at UFE. I've been there once and I did enjoy it, especially the coffee that's offered in that center. As well as want to appreciate the University of Missouri for the partnership that Professor Jauger is doing this. One of the persons that I want to also appreciate here is Bruna. Bruna is taking a class with me at the University of Texas, San Antonio, and she is also a Brazilian, a very critical scholar. So she's in here. This is spring break. Most students have taken off to Florida, but she decided to stay here and come and listen to this talk. So. And all of you, I see Brazilians, Americans, and whoever is in here, I see you as friends and colleagues. So, and I'm honored to be part of this. But Bruno sent me an email on Monday, a very exciting email to tell me that I should check the news. President Lula is no longer handcuffed. I was so excited and I'm delighted to be talking today about the great news of President Lula and you know, have this talk just after Monday. So it just gives a reflecting mode to say, we look forward to 2022 in Brazil elections. So that's what I wanted to be excited about as we talk about transformative literacies, transnationalism, and people creating really unity. So, and you'll tell me if I'm moving a little fast. I know that somebody is translating somewhere, and I'm not even seeing that because I don't know how to read Portuguese. So,
Hi,
I want-
oi, todo mundo. Quem chegou agora, a gente está no chat colocando a tradução. Então, quem não abriu ainda o chat, por favor, fique embaixo da tela, né? Vocês podem colocar para aparecer do lado. E se não está dando, se a gente não está dando conta, por favor, se manifestem que a gente para e faz uma pequena pausa para resumir a fala do Demande, que comentou também, né, a importância de falar os nomes, né, do jeito que a pessoa se identifica. Isso vale também para a língua também, tá? A gente ser inclusivo hoje. Demande, I was just reminding people to look on the chat if they're looking for the translation.
Right. So if you have the first slide on for my PowerPoint, I hope you have it on now. So the title of it is called in English, Movements, and with an S, movements, multiple movements to transform literacy in the global South. And I frame it as a global South, even though I talk in this presentation, I'll be going to which we're part of the global South, and just talking about the struggle in there. And in the next slide, you see that I want to start with, I want to start to share the demographies of South Africa. So can I just, I have a little glitch. Let me come back to it. Okay, sounds good. I wasn't able to see my own screen, but I'll be hoping that you're moving along with me with those slides because I want to see my own screen.
I'm on slide 2, apartheid racial categories.
Right. So those who are familiar with South Africa, and most of you are, I mean, apartheid was a big thing and it still continued to be the remnants of it. So you realize that we're not a country as big as Brazil or as the United States. We're just about, I guess, we're about 55 million. And with the HIV/AIDS, we got that killing our people without us getting, you know, the help we need from those pharmaceutical companies. You know, that's another story that talking about COVID right now. But we're almost about 45 million people right now. So when you see African in the sense of South Africa, I'll be classified as an African or Black in South Africa. And people who are classified as colored people are people of mixed race. And people classified as Indian will be people who were brought to South Africa to work as slaves. People say, well, indentured laborers, but that is slavery. And then you also have people who colonized South Africa who were only 9.6%. So this is the context in which my paper, really this presentation talks about.
Next slide, Demande.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
But
Next
you don't
slide.
need to translate anything, right?
No.
Okay. So, yes, next please. So that slide on the speaker's positionality. I found it in research that the person who, there are a lot of people whose voices were actually denied in research. in public lives, in scholarship. So I usually like to start with my positionality to say what connects my multiple identities with the research and teaching that I do at the university as well. So I cannot do anything without looking at my positionality as a Black man who grew up under apartheid, a very violent state. So I was born in the midst of apartheid. I grew up under it. I went to schools that were apartheid schools. So it was a really violent state where children were killed every day by police, right? And each time I see an article talks about apartheid as segregation, I think those are people who are trying to minimize what apartheid was. Apartheid wasn't about segregation, but it was the brutal discrimination. So to say it was segregation because of the word apartheid is really an understatement. So it so much connected to colonialism with the hate of Black and brown bodies, as well as patriarchy, which completely did not deny to women any rights. You know, all women that, you know, under apartheid, they wouldn't be. It's a colonialism in the different forms. But apartheid also in South Africa brought in this thing called of forcing people to move away from spaces where they could make a living and remove them and put them forceful removal to places that were arid, you know, where they have to beg, to survive. And that created that subservient master domination where Black men have to be on the bus to come back and look for labor. Black women were forced, not that they liked to, but they were forced to go in and raise white children and neglect their own with the purpose of making money because they were forced. So that was called the Group Areas Act in 1950s, the forced removals of Sophia Town to places that people would be familiar with the name Soweto. Soweto simply stands for Southwestern Township, so it's a Black only. I come from the South Eastern Townships, which is called Davidson, but there's no difference in there. But what I want to underscore in my presentation was the power of women during those struggles and their children, how the strength of Black women, and not in a way to exaggerate it, but because you're fighting against the police state, but in a way of how they protected us amidst this horrible and dangerous environment where a person can grow up. And needless to say, we were not allowed to vote. Actually, my father passed away in 1981. He actually never voted, until his death. So when I voted for the first time in South Africa, I was also voting for him as well. But today we're talking about literacies. So as we go to the next slide, our education system, the one that I went through, did not prepare us for transformative literacies, but only to say that we should become manual laborers to work with men, and also an oppressive individual, right? So there are white men who are not racist, and I may dare to say like somebody like Joel, but I'm talking about those who are so much attached, who do not really realize that the privilege that they carry in and out, right? Just as patriarchy, that man would be walking around, not even realizing the patriarchy that structural ways that has protected men for so long, or, you know, as the same as the whiteness that has protected white folks for so long. So you see there on my next slide, there is a young man, a young Black man carrying a younger child, and the other young woman next to them. They're all crying, and it says 1976. So 1976, I wasn't, I hadn't started school, I think. Yeah, I haven't started school at that time. But these were the kids of 1976 who were shot from the back. And talking about languages, I wanted to bring this slide here because the message here was the language issue, where Black children said, we do not want to use the language that you want us to use in schools. That's all they're seen to be shot from the back. And I should have put a slide here on languages in South Africa. South Africa has 11 official languages. But when I was growing up, the only language you could use if you were to go to an official institution, it was Afrikaans. And some of you here already know Afrikaans is more like it comes from Dutch. So, and I'm happy to share some of my writings on showing the origins of Afrikaans in South Africa, and also how it evolved and how it became an institutional language that was used really also to control. So the kids of 1976, all they asked was, Afrikaans is actually excluding us from the outside world. We want to have a language, although it's a colonial language, but at least English language will connect us to the outside world so that we could find allies. And I learned recently that also we have to problematize the word allies as well. But in 1976, more than a dozen of school kids, like high school kids, were shot and killed by police. And all they had, the transgression was protesting a colonial language in schools, which is Afrikaans. I forgot to ask you, Professor Windle, if this is gonna be interactive, or you'll expect me to have present everything before you stop and ask.
Amanda, it's up to you. So if you want to keep going, we can, or we could stop, see if there are any questions.
Yeah. So the next slide would show people's education for people's power rising. I'm proud to say that, with pains as well, that this is my generation. This was my generation. I still live this generation. The generation of the 1980s who went to the street and say, we're tired of the kind of literacies, the kind of education that doesn't help us to become human beings. You know, it was using Paulo Freire's language. It was so dehumanizing, but even so, it just had a bleak future for Black and brown families in South Africa. So the people's education really, it was a movement, and I'm gonna talk about this later, that we were also energized by the little copies, not the whole book, but little pages of Paulo Freire's writing, you know, that proliferated South Africa, because pedagogy of the oppressed at that time was not allowed in South Africa, was banned. the literature on liberation theologies. You couldn't find in South Africa. Actually, if you were found with such literature, then you were labeled a terrorist, and then you'll disappear, quote unquote. I mean, all of you Brazilians, Americans, and mostly Brazilians, you're familiar, although you haven't lived it in this generation, but you're familiar with dictatorship. I have you here who've lived even another worse system of dictatorship where you couldn't do anything that the government that was censored, so to speak, by the regime. So even during our times, and there were so many of us who were killed. We're supposed to start with a little clip. I'm probably going to stop here to allow that clip because if I went beyond this, then the clip may not have that meaning. But I think that's the right time to get the clip on to show how the police officers, kill students for the language and curriculum, not on the streets, but on school campuses, right? So once I went back to one of the countries in Namibia, which was our neighboring countries, to do research there. And I asked one of my professors and say, why do you have a stand for the gun in here? And something that I did not know is that, well, actually they didn't want civilians to teach classrooms. They wanted military to come in with their guns, put the guns right there, and then teach, I'll use the word propaganda, which is fitting in here, to teach to hate yourself and glorify Europe and white privilege. So I'm looking at the Black Lives Matter movement right now around the world. I know there is a Black Lives Matter in Brazil. It comes with a different name. I've met with the Afro-Brazilian students at UFPEL, just listening to them, the kind of work that they do, the grassroots work, it's part of what was going on in here. So I will allow those few minutes to show the clip from Sarafina. Maybe will give us a sense of what I was talking about in here.
Okay, I've just put up the slide, which has what the phrases from the start of Sarafina. Então aqui, gente, no início do filme, que eu vou passar uns trechos. Vou deixar vocês lerem. Em 1976, o governo sul-africano declarou o estado de emergência. Pelos próximos 13 anos, os alunos adotaram uma campanha de resistência. Mais de 750 foram mortos, mais de 10 mil presos, muitos mais torturados e agredidos. Este filme é dedicado a eles. Demanda, should I show the 3 clips? Hello?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I have to apologize, my internet, I've already switched the room. I was sitting on the other side, but my internet, for some reason, is not working so well, so my apologies.
Name of the first man in, wait for it, creation. Adam. Right. And what color was Adam? White. White? Who says so? I never saw that in the Bible. Did you see it in the Bible? No, it doesn't say that. It says God created man in his own image, which means to be like him. So what color is God? Give me a color, people.
Gold. Pink. Black. Silver.
Green. Green. I like green. What kind of green? Pea green, sea green, grass green, olive green, emerald green, jade green, green as the dollars in American wallets, or green as the mists on the hills of Kinshasa. God green, mankind green, yes, I like it. So what is the name of the first man in South Africa? Right. Nobody knows his name. What's the name of the first white man in South Africa? Date. History is so beautiful, it makes you cry. Here is Holland. Here comes Jan van Riebeck in his boat, followed by lots of other boats. And they're on their way to the East Indies to fetch some spices. But they're passing South Africa and they know that they're thirsty, so they stop here for a drink. Jan says, hey, why don't I stay here and set up a refreshment stop? This way it will be here every time you pass by. Good idea. So that's what South Africa is for the whites. A gas station stop on the way to somewhere else. A Pepsi and a piece in the sun. And it's let's go, fellas. We can't stay here forever. But some of them did, right? Right.
You think children would do a thing like this?
Oh, yes. But why? Well, they're being used, aren't they? You see, children will believe anything. A child will believe anything an adult tells him. Father Christmas, talking animals, communism, anything.
To me, a school is a holy place, like a church. That's why I hate to see soldiers in a school.
Me too. Leave the kids out of it, let the men fight it out. What about the teachers? Any rotten apples there?
I don't know.
So now begins the great trek of 1836. The white boys are looking north. They say, what do you see? We see great land, man, beautiful land. Anybody there? No, just a few Kaffirs sticking spears up each other's future. So what do you say we make a trek? Good idea. And what does this bring to us? Shamboks, passbooks, PW Bota, Afrikaans lessons, and democracy, and justice, and very, very, very fine schools. Yes. We're so lucky. Isn't history beautiful?
Has that changed to the next screen, everybody? Can you see the next video?
Yeah. Yep.
This store is owned by Boers. We have to support each other. Don't give your money to the Boers. There's no law that says you have to shop here. Boycott the Boers. Fuck what I want to say. Boycott the bloody store.
Hey, shut up! You go home. What's all this fooling with other people's business?
Why do you shop here, Mama?
Because I want to. And I'm not your mama. Now out of my way.
You want to give your money to the Boers? You want to help them and not your own people?
You get out of my way. You boys don't help no one. All you do is make things bad. What's your daddy doing? Letting you run white like this?
My daddy is doing the same as you. Nothing.
That's right.
That's why nothing changes, Mama.
Leave my shopping. Leave my shopping.
I want to tell you something, Nelson. I can't tell anyone else. Whenever I go to visit my mother, I feel like I'm visiting another world and that I don't belong there. That's a bad feeling, right? I feel like I belong somewhere else, somewhere I've not even seen yet. But I'll know it when I see it. This other world is called Parktown. They keep the streets very clean in Parktown. Mama lives in a big white house, well, in a small room in the back, really. But they treat her well. They say, oh, Angelina's just like one of the family. The children just love her. You know how good these black women are with children. They're right. Mama is good with children. Only her children don't live here, do they?
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
Mom.
Sarafina. How are my babies?
Job is not as always, but everyone's fine, Mama. Mama, I need some money. Lindiwe has to have new shoes. They split. They're no good. Have the boys gone away?
Yes, just for the afternoon. How much money do you want? Sarafina? Sarafina? Where do you think you're going? Sarafina? Sarafina, come back here.
A little refreshment, Mrs. van der Moeven. The maid will take your coat. Gin, brandy, rum, or perhaps you would like the maid to mix you a refreshing lemonade. Do sit down, Mrs. van der Moeven. You walked all the way from the front gate on your own legs. Huh, you must be exhausted. Next time, you wait by the gate and the maid will carry you. No problem, my dear. These black women are so strong.
That's enough, Sarafina. Sometimes you're such a naughty little girl. Sarafina? Sarafina, where are you going?
Woo!
That is what the syllabus says, so that is what I teach. So, what do we learn from this? Napoleon's army, the best equipped, the best trained army, the most powerful army on the continent. Everybody says they cannot be beaten. So what happens? They're gone. Why? Were they beaten in battle? No. They were defeated by the people. Oh my God. People can defeat their armies. History has proved it. People can defeat the armies.
You, come.
There's something at my house which I don't need anymore. Get rid of it for me. Listen, one day this is going to be all right. You know me. I love a happy ending.
Let's go.
Demande, Do you want the slides back, or do you want to pause?
I can talk a little bit about this, and then when you bring the slides back, just bring it to Black mothers raising white children.
Okay, let me just give a bit in português. Quem não viu esse filme, das 3 cenas, né, a cena do meio que não teve legenda, é Serafina, né, que é a personagem principal, que vai visitar a mãe dela, que trabalha como empregada na casa de uma família boa, né, em parte da cidade que os negros só podem trabalhar, não morar. E a outra parte da cena é um jovem promovendo o boicote das lojas boas, né? Os boas são os brancos colonistas que são da Holanda, né? Que falam essa língua africana, que não tem nada a ver com a África, é holandês, né? Então, por isso que vem a polícia, ele está promovendo o boicote, né? Eu não sei se ficou claro ou não. E a última cena, né, a professora vista como aliado do movimento estudantil que é presa. Se alguém gostaria de fazer uma pergunta, se não ficou claro alguma coisa, talvez pode falar agora, antes de fazer a última parte da apresentação do demanda. Pode se manifestar no chat e falar também aqui. Back to you then, I think, Demande. Anybody want to ask a question? Anything not clear in English?
So there aren't any questions so far?
Not yet. Back to you, Demande.
Okay. And I'm not going to speak much longer because it's almost to the top of the hour. I'll end at the top of the hour. And the reason, you know, maybe Professor Wendell has already said this, the reason that I always appreciate this film, it has been to Hollywood. And, you know, once things have gone to Hollywood, there are some things that they do to commercialize it. Some of the exaggerations, one, but also some of the things that will dumb it down a little bit, right? So it's Hollywood. But for me right now, it is still one of the clips that can give you a full picture of what I was talking about, the 1976, how police brutality, I mean, you know, those who are in the United States, I know Professor Mariam Jorge and Bruno and others in Texas, you know that this is now the time of Minneapolis. You know, I don't even want to say his name, that police officer who killed George Floyd. So for me, this is always a really difficult situation, having grown, raised in a police state. You know, and even here in the US, the institution, you know, the institution of policing is always targeting Black and brown bodies in South Africa, in here. And I know in Brazil, they killed the mayor of Rio. I don't know if it was the mayor or the woman they killed recently, the police. So the subject of police, it just brings bitter, you know, a taste in my mouth and makes me emotional. So but we have to talk about it. So I wanted to also remind us that when you talk about literacy and issues of language and how, you know, children start learning from their homes, basically. They start to learn the language, then that's where literacy is, just by talking, not even by writing. That's where literacy is, in my opinion. And I'll share with you a piece that I wrote at the end of this that brings this argument even more stronger, in my opinion. But I want to say first that I really have memories. I don't know if those memories were good or bad, but I still have memories of my mother having to leave every morning, Monday through Saturday, every morning, to go and work as a domestic servant. I still have those memories. The coal maids in South Africa. So, and they work for white families, as you've seen Sarafina going to that place. Actually, that last part of the film is a clear depiction of how Black mothers work in those homes. So, and you think that, okay, why did they go and work in there? But the environment had forced them to do that. The environment has forced them to go in and look for money so that they could buy food, with their husband gone to work in the mines or even just in the factories. So I argue that while I did not understand at the time the politics of being a maid in South Africa, I did not understand it so well. But I now realize that most Black mothers were essentially raising white kids, teaching white kids in an early age in their languages on how to do things. And there's nothing wrong with that. The only problem with that for me is, but they were not doing that on their own kids. So that early literacy coming from your mother, and how they compensated for this was to leave us with grandparents, so everybody in your family will become your mother then, when your real mother, for example, is raising white kids. So it's a really complicated conversation that hopefully I think that we could have that, somebody could ask that question and we could further it in our conversation right now. So one of the important things about being literate is to be able to understand the world, is to be able to interpret the world, is to be able to see the environment in which you live in, is to be able to know the history. And the history I'm talking about right now is a history of colonialism in South Africa. And for me, and let me just say it here, I want to apologize that all the people who really helped me understand colonialism and the deficit thinking in Black education were all males. But you'll understand why, right? I don't blame myself for that, but I want you to know that I'm very mindful. But Bantu Biko is one of the scholars who was also a Black scholar. He was a medical student when he was assassinated by the police because he was talking about the conscientization of the mind, right? So to say that, how could we dispel colonialism and kick out that the the internalized racism that we have in ourselves that was brought in by the system. So, and I have to be honest with you that I didn't get to know Bantu Biko's work until I came to the US, where I was able to go and find books. And one of my professors, I was in Massachusetts at that time, said to me, you've heard of Steve Bantu Biko? I said, yeah, he was an activist and he was killed. And then she said to me, and this is Professor Sonia Nieto, a Latinx woman in Massachusetts, said, he has also written some stuff, but they wouldn't give the stuff to you. So for the first time, I got to read his work. And then I began to see my own identity, to know why the kind of education that was given, it had a purpose. And at that time, I also encountered the work of Paulo Freire. So the work of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian scholar, really helped me also to look at, to examine also the kind of, to me, it was taking me back to my high school years and starting to question what I was being taught. So I'll give an example. Upon reading Paulo Freire's work, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, has only 4 chapters, but really dense. So I sat back and I wanted to reflect on my own. Then while I was in college, one of my college professors said to the whole class, we were like 200 students, freshmen in a big hall. We were talking about the interior wars in the Cape Colony and, the annexation of the land and all this. And then he paused and said, the British won. It was a good victory for the British to win that part of the land. But the problem was, and he was really, really exuberant and excited to say the problem. He said, there was no labor because the Xhosa people were lazy. They didn't want to work. So I remember regurgitating that answer in the exam when they say, oh, why were British people so upset about the labor problems? And I just said, oh yeah, the British were very upset because the Xhosa people, and I'm talking about my own people, that they're lazy, right? So, but that's a kind of education that upon reading Paulo Freire really helped me to go back and examine that. And I know that for people like us who come from the African countries and in the United States, they would say that, oh, how relevant Paulo Freire is. I was once criticized that how could I apply Paulo Freire in South Africa? And I found so many similarities with Brazil when I read Paulo Freire. And frankly, with all countries that were colonized and that continue to be colonized. So I found his work so important. So, and I talk about scholarship, not to privilege scholarship, because we could learn anywhere, we could learn from the picket line. I mean, one of the best educations that I got was talking to activists on the picket line every Friday in Madison, right? Just talking about how the world affair works, the military industrial complex and all this. It's not something that you could learn in the classroom, right? I'm not privileging academic scholarship, but I say that getting the right books that could help you begin to unpack. Paulo Freire helped me with that, the unpacking of the ideology. So as I continue to read, I came across Carter G. Woodson's work as well, where his book that I read is one of the important books that, if you black and brown and white or any racial group, you got to read this book if you have not yet. But we're talking about how the education system actually miseducated. I would say the miseducation of the Negro, that was the title of the book. But if you listen to Carter G. Woodson talks, it's actually the miseducation of people who did not have power, period, including women. So it's a book that also helped me to finish my dissertation when I was doing the dissertation, trying to finish that. So as I was once told I was in a conference thinking that my work is on Black parents, until this professor said to me, "Are you aware that your work is also on children's rights?" And I said, "No, I wasn't aware." Can people still hear me? I hear a little funny sound on my side here. Can people hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there is a funny sound going on in here. I don't know what it is, but let's go on. So there is a last name that you probably won't be able to pronounce. His first name is John and the last name is Ngasike. And John Ngasike's work, I came across it through my mentor, who said, "Your work cuts across children's rights, and you just wrote about children's rights in South Africa. And when Black children, for the first time, they were given rights to go to school and even be funded, right? So, but John was talking about missionary education and the British in Kenya, and to see those similarities. But what really struck me in Ngasike's work, who's now back in Kenya, he was here at Arizona State University in the US. He argues in one of his work, he argues that what kind of an education system, what kind of literacy, where if you are in Kenya, the curriculum would say your literacy is to have you recite, sing, and recite about the London Bridge. So that was the literacy. Recite, sing about the London Bridge. And his argument was, how wouldn't it be better if these children would be reciting, singing about the Nairobian Bridge, which actually they may be crossing it every day when they're going to school, right? Here's the Nairobi Bridge, you cross it, you go to school, you sing about it, you know it. So your literacy actually is expanding because it's something that you sing about it and you even see it. So I look at Ngasike's work, and it just made sense to me that it will be a better literacy that will help you think about your own environment, right? To say, this is the Kenyan bridge that I want to sing about. So I just have 3 more slides, really, as I conclude, because people will say, well, the Monday is just talking about all these challenges as if nothing has happened in the past. I mean, in the recent years, I mean, the post-apartheid literacies, I argue that there is still segregation in South Africa. Some schools have desegregated, but there's also resegregation, right? The point I just want to really emphasize here is the outbreak of COVID-19 around the world, which has also exposed the rawness of intergenerational history among Black communities in South Africa. And when I talk about the intergenerational history or trauma, is to say Black and brown communities have been living this hardship, which became trauma. They take it from generation to generation. And I think that's a scholarship that mostly comes from Native Americans, First Nation, Canadian. And I dare to, I haven't done research on this, but I think that the Quilombola people in Brazil, I may be wrong, but I think that they may have that as well as the indigenous folks in there. But what happened right in the midst of COVID-19, The government was telling people that they have to wash their hands. They have to, make sure that they're clean, they distance, they do all these things. But how could you wash your hands when a lot of Black communities in South Africa, they don't have running water? And this is not something new. I'm sure it happens. It happens here in the United States, where people are given poisonous water. I mean, the question of Detroit. I just forgot the name of the town in Detroit. The town of Michael Moore. Somebody can remind me what that town is. So you could get water, but if it's water that has toxic in it, it's just like same as not getting water. Actually, it's even better not to get water than to be given toxic water that will kill you. So, but in terms of literacies, and this is not surprising, that elite schools, and 90% of them are white schools, they were not interrupted by COVID-19. They just buckled down, they all had computers, their schools were like, we're going on, right? And then you look at Black schools where really even parents don't have internet, so you could have internet, but where are you gonna use it if you don't have a computer? So the COVID experiences right now, and as I write in one of the papers, I don't say that it shows us something new. I just said it exposed the rawness of inequalities in South Africa right now. So those are some of the things that, and going back to language in South Africa, where language is actually used as a proxy by elite schools to deny educational access. And that happens in different places. Sometimes they may not use a different language. They could use test scores. You could go to the next slide, Joel. They, like once I was in Chile, it wasn't really a language that was used as a proxy to deny educational access, but it was those not PISA scores, but it was students' SATs that if you didn't get it, and they knew how those were set up. And in the United States, obviously, that's what that is. But South Africa right now is clearly relying on language to deny access to Black children. And in the research that it was just an observation. I didn't interview people much about it. It was part of the broader study where I asked people about the incident. 2019, a white teacher was caught on camera segregating children in a kindergarten classroom based on race. And when was asked why segregating that, she couldn't give a clear answer why she was putting people based on, you Black, sit with a Black kid, you white, sit with Black, So this is a literacy of these kids. You're showing them segregation at the kindergarten. Like what kind of literacy you're doing in a democracy, so to speak. Also, the question of access, to say, in this school, we're gonna use a language of instruction that will exclude the majority of these children. That way, we could have the school for our own, right? So, and really the last slide, I wanted to trouble the concept of literacy or illiteracy. I was motivated to write this piece. I was invited by the literacy people to their conference, and they brought me to their business meeting. And as I was writing this piece, I thought about it to say, I wanted to trouble the concept of illiteracy itself, or literacy, if you like. And then I argued that to many, illiteracy means not being able to read or write. right? So if you don't know how to read or write, then that means, and might I add, you might know how to read and write in Zulu or Xhosa or in other indigenous language, but if you did not know how to read or write in a colonial language, then that means you are illiterate. And I argued that it comes from the word unlettered. So it was a colonialist assumption that people who could not read or write were uneducated and knew very little to nothing about the world, right? But however, many cultures, especially in the global South, we pass knowledge on orally and through discussion and practice, right? People have animals, they observe what the animals are doing, and that's a kind of knowledge. So these cultures, our cultures, may be very well educated without using books. So I can think of popular education in Brazil, and I may have misunderstood it, but popular education was mostly like embedded in the grassroots level, the same as people's education for people's power in South Africa, where we truly connected to the communities. So I welcoming us to start the conversation on this, and thank you for being patient to listen to me for more than an hour. It's a torture listening to somebody like me.
Demande, thank you so much. Now we've got about 45 minutes for discussion. A gente tem agora uns 45 minutos para debate. Muitíssimo obrigado, Demande. Vamos aproveitar esse tempo para comentar. Quem quiser perguntar, comentar, eu vou fazer uma lista, só colocar um nome no chat, talvez, para... Aí eu vou chamando.
Can I, Joe?
Yes, sure.
Yes. Demandi, thank you so much for your talk. Very inspiring. It was not hard at all. I didn't even see it was an hour. So thank you so much. So I think that, as you mentioned before, Brazil and South Africa, and of course many parts of the world, they have a lot in common, especially nowadays, right? I went to South Africa, to Cape Town in 2019. And I went there as a visiting scholar, and I was invited to talk about Paulo Freire. And this was the comment that I heard most from students. You know, Brazil and South Africa, they have a lot in common, our histories and etc. So thinking about your presentation, I think that an inevitable question is related to the fact that some parts of the world nowadays, such as Brazil, but many others, we could cite many others, but I think that Brazil stands as a very, very sad and frustrating case. Some parts of the world have moved their politics, education, social programs towards what people are called neoconservative, like this conservative neoconservatism in terms of family, religion, homogeneity, monolingualism, monovisions of culture, and in education, militarization, school without ideologies, and dictatorial decisions now in Brazil, dictatorial decisions in silencing teachers. So my questions for you would be, what can you say, what can we say to our future teachers and educators within this scenario? How can we develop transnational and transformative literacy in this context? So my second question has to do with this. Should we teacher educators, which is my case, and Joe's case, and Miriam Jorge's case, and Mara's case, should we,
All of us.
all of us, should we be acting in micro levels and be okay with that? Like, I'm within my classroom and I'm doing my best and this is okay? Or should we be thinking about something more macro and revolutionary? Last question, demand, demand. How can we dialogue with others that think differently from us? Because I've been thinking about this polarization in Brazil, and this dialogue has been very, very hard. I know that Boaventura de Sousa Santos, the Portuguese philosopher, he has claimed for social and cognitive justice. And that means we need to face capitalism, patriarchy, and colonialism. But my question is, how? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Whew. Daniel, thank you. I didn't get your first question, but I'll start with the second and go to the third, and then you could repeat your first one. Um, you know, I think we as teachers, that's why I was so excited when I started this partnership with UFI, Universidade Federal de Fluminense, UFPEL, and also at Professor George's university, UFMJ. I think that was precisely for this reason, that how could you learn from each other and exchange ideas? And the fact that I haven't had money, but I have had some professors from UFPEL coming in here and do literacy work, not just to exchange those ideas and what's going on in Brazil right now. So to me, that is a transformative way of doing things. I would be cautious to use the word revolutionary because most of us have not been becoming like an activist. And I'll tell you why we're not so much activists in a sense, is because the environment of the university. If you work as a professor or you're a student at the university and you did not know that the university is hegemonic, then you probably don't know where you are, because all universities are very hegemonic. And so it curtails us to really be so much involved in grassroots level. Well, become a full professor, then you could do whatever you want, but you'll be ostracized still. So I will use the word transformative, where even through our writing, through our teaching, Bruna right now is in my class, and I try to do that in terms of showing the doctoral student what does it mean to teach in a transformative way, or using those ideas that are transformative. So I think we should be doing that, and not at the macro level, but forming those collaborative efforts that teachers should always do. And but not just with teachers, Danielle, but I always think that with communities too, because if you do not know your community, you probably don't know what you're talking about. If you say, well, I only teach here, but I don't know who live here, right? I haven't had a taco, or a barbacoa in the community, but I'm with the community in here. So the third question, really, it's depressing to me, the third question, because the people that I've seen, even in some of my classrooms when I teach, it becomes really hard to dialogue with people who have already formed their own ideas about the social, economic, and political conditions. People who talk about they are lazy. They want just to use the taxpayers' money. They are on, remind me the word, they are on welfare because they don't want to work. So it's really hard, but we always want to try to do that. But to tell you the truth, I get really depressed by that's why I've turned to avoid social media as much as I could, especially now with this trial going on. Things I'm gonna be hearing is gonna be depressing me so much. So what was the first question, Danielle?
Yes, you have answered, but
I've
what?
answered all of
Yeah, yeah,
them,
yeah, yeah. What can we say to our
including the
future?
first one.
Yeah, what can we say?
Oh, okay.
What can we say to our future teachers? But yeah, thank you very much. I do agree with you,
Okay, sure.
and I like the comment on the caution in terms of revolution, because it can bring senses, you know, meanings that are that
Yeah.
can be very, very complex and complicated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you.
Demande, there's a question about how you see, or do you see a difference between the concept of education and literacy? And can I add one more question? I'll ask Lucas to put his question as well. That first question was from Diego about difference between education and literacy. Lucas.
Hello, Joe. Hello, Professor. Um, I want to ask you, how do you think we should start to talk about colonialism in an elementary school, for example? Since we are only language teachers and the system thinks that we are there just to teach grammar, for example. And thank you very much for this class. I'm really glad to hear all of that. Thank you so much.
Demande, over to you.
Thank you. So Diego, that's a really good question. How do you teach about colonialism when you are seen as just an English teacher? I will argue that if you have liberty to use different resources where you could start interactive conversation, you know, things like, okay, let's talk about, for example, the language that we speak, who developed it, you know, or how did it evolve to be here? Why? Oh, so for example, oh, you said elementary school, right? Okay. I've never taught at elementary school, but I don't know. I'll ask somebody who's in elementary school. But if you're with kids who are in middle school, you will probably ask about the language itself, right? And say how it evolved. I guess for me it will be mostly to say why around the world English becomes such the dominant language for so many people, and even in cultures that do not use English as a first language, but they want English to be a first language. I'll tell you a story. I was just came from, you know, from South Africa, and I buy my niece a little postcard. I send it to him. I write it in Zulu, in my first language. And I tell him how much I loved him and how much I missed him. I just say this in the first language, and then I send it home. So summertime, I went home and he showed me the card. He's excited. I said, okay, read it for me, because I was trying to see if he knows how to read, right? And actually, this is my nephew, not my niece. Excuse me. This is my nephew, and he started to say to me, "Say, well, Uncle, I can't read what you wrote." I'm like, "I thought you were at school already." He's like, "Yeah, but we study English at school. That you've written on, right?" And that was our first language that we were talking at that time. So I think there will be ways of introducing that in terms of the domination, why certain language are more superior than others. But I want to give you the exact examples of using in an elementary classroom. Although I know that there are a lot of artifacts. It's just like when you teach dolls, right? So, well, you don't teach dolls, but when you're in the playground, when you were to use only white dolls, that study Clark and Clark, that's 1936 or 1956, Clark and Clark with the doll study, where you found most kids, including Black kids, gravitating towards a white doll, and you give them a black doll, they say, oh, okay, we don't like that doll, and why? So those kind of things. But yeah, I won't be able to answer your question, but those few examples. But if you think about education and literacy, I would say that it's just about thinking about curriculum and education, right? What kind of curriculum would make you a rounded person and be called educated, and educated in a sense that you are able to realize your environment and the environment of the communities. Not in a sense that I have my diploma, I live in my own house, and that's what education is for me. So literacy is the one that should be able to push all of us, especially our children, to ask themselves of critical questions about community building, about coexistence, and if we're not asking those questions about how to coexist, how to think about issues before we argue that there's no COVID, right? Even when you're given the data. So you just said, well, so-and-so said there's no COVID-19, therefore I'm not gonna wear my mask. So that's a person, even with a PhD arguing that, that's a different kind of literacy. It's not the literacy that asks questions about that. And I don't want to put myself into trouble in here. There may be people who don't like a mask in this room, so I apologize.
Demande, the next person on the list was Miriam. I don't know if she's just said that her question has been answered. So I don't know if she wants to make a comment in that case. She's in the car. I can see Miriam in the car driving away.
Can you hear me? Yes, I've just got my vaccine, and this is a moment to share and to use as a protest against what is happening to Brazil right now in terms of the policies and vaccinations and everything else. So, and I believe this is part of this so-called necropolitics. And so, but I was going to discuss the meanings of literacy, but one of my questions had to do with teacher education, and how would you envision teacher education based on these transnational perspectives, because these experiences are educational for us, and I believe for our teacher candidates. So what thoughts do you have about that? How could we strengthen our activism as professors through maybe a transnational approach to teacher education?
Professor George, I would not want to tell students that take my views about it. I would want to direct us to read critically about what it means to be a public school teacher. So for example, go ahead. I thought somebody was talking. Was it? Should I continue?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. So I wouldn't want to say, please take my views about it, but I'll pose the question. I think a good for me, what has always worked for me would be, and I don't know if it works, let me take that back. Maybe it doesn't work. To say that if we are preparing ourselves, me included, to be teaching in a diverse community, what should we know about the history of race in any country that was colonized? What should we know about the history of patriarchy in any country that, I've never seen a country that doesn't practice patriarchy, where women are not oppressed. Maybe there are countries, I don't know, but I always, the history of it may not be as rampant now, but the history of it is there. So how do we teach in a classroom with kids with disabilities, right? Where we could have, so that they could have equal access, where they're part of the class, in a sense that where they are not being excluded, to say, oh well, being called retarded, being called disabled, oh, that's so awful, right? So how do you then teach right now in a classroom where you have kids who belong in the LGBTQ plus community, or whose parents are in the LGBTQ plus community? So what would you be thinking about that in terms of becoming so representative in your discussion, right? So when I was a teaching assistant, I would go to after school programs where I'll go in and tutor kids, and I was excited, just and I was really young, and once they called the student I was busy tutoring, they called them and say, through the loudspeaker, they said, "Demand, you got to bring that child." And I brought the child. Said, "Well, but we've just started doing the tutoring, and she cannot leave because all other students are still here. Why is she leaving now? Don't just tell the parents that, wait and come at the time." And the front office said to me, "Do you see that taxi cab waiting outside?" I say, "Yeah." Said, "Well, it's waiting for this kid because she lives in a hotel by herself." So I did not know that out of all these kids, there are kids who will go back to a home without a parent to do homework for them. So it will be for me to introduce, to help my students know that, including myself, not to tell them what to do, but if they were to know this. And the last point on this, Professor George, I like your question, by the way. So I always, I teach a course on equity and diversity here at the university. It's basically mostly about race. So at the end of the semester, students will tell me how excited they were. They learned this, they learned what color blindness is. They thought that to be colorblind is something nice, that you are conscientious that people's color, and you shouldn't be looking at their color and all this. So they learn a lot. But what thing really struck me is, I always say, thank you for sitting in this class and allowing the conversations, because sometimes you may be in the classroom where the conversation, the dialogue is actually curtailed. They don't want that dialogue to continue, right? But for allowing it. So I said, I will be so happy someday to read in the news or hear about you to say that you are doing exactly the same things that we're doing in this class. But I trust that you'll be doing that. So that's how I usually end. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Professor George, but please add. I know you have other information that could help me learn too. So maybe we could exchange that later or even now.
Obrigada pela resposta.
Obrigado.
Does anybody have a question? Ou pode fazer pergunta, comentário em português também.
Joel?
Pode falar, Ganete.
Hello. Okay. Hi. Hi, Professor Demande.
Boa
Please,
tarde.
boa tarde. Please meeting you at this meeting here.
I saw you on the other seminar. I was watching you on YouTube, so I'm seeing you for the second time. Okay.
Yes. Thanks for your presentation. I was very impacted about a lot of things that you brought for us. And I told Joel that I have a lot of things in my mind. I don't know if I can say everything that I'm thinking now in English, but I will try. I was very, very curious about the situation in South Africa. And I think like Professor Danielle, I think that sure we have a lot of common in our history. And I was very curious because I'm not working direct with literacy, but I'm working with language. Uh, I, I I was English teacher and now I'm German teacher. And I like language. And I think very, very funny. This is the way that you say the chosa.
Awesome. Okay, I can teach you Xhosa. You know, a little
Yeah,
bit of
please.
Xhosa and Xhosa.
One day I will learn this too. But I was very curious because you talked with us about this literacy and how important it is for the people in South Africa to keep this language because that's their own language, yes. And here in Brazil, we suppose that we all speak Portuguese, but we know that a lot of people in Brazil, Portuguese is not the mother language. Yeah, but it's very difficult for us to recognize the other language that we speak in Brazil. And we work with applied linguistic, and we are trying to bring this language to the visibility. And I'm only curious. What do you think about the difference of these works about the language in Brazil and South Africa? Because in South Africa, you are trying to keep this native language, nah? But you should learn English at school, nah? And here in Brazil, you should learn Portuguese too, but we don't recognize that we have a lot of other mother language in Brazil too. We have a lot of immigrant language in South Brazil. We have a lot of línguas indígenas from our Indiana here in Brazil too. But these languages are not at the university and they are not at school, and the Brazilian people, they don't accept and they don't know that this language belong to our history too. We don't learn this at school, and now it's very difficult for us that work with the foreign language, because I'm always asking, what is really foreign language for us here in Brazil? And I'm only curious to hear from you how we should work with this difference, and how we introduce the the meaning about the work of this language. It's the same with English. The work here in Brazil about language started with the English teachers. And these groups continue study and make research about language, about foreign language, but they always begin with the English language. They also don't consider that foreign language and other language can be also Tupi, Guarani, other Indian language too. That's only one of the things that's in my mind. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Professor Ivanite, this is a really good question. And I can just say that all what you said is true. I agree with everything that you said. That our languages, uh, our people really become disinterested in indigenous languages because first they don't even know about them because they were obliterated and they were not taught. They were so and but they also think about what is a language that could give me social mobility, right? So there have been studies here in the US where some Mexican American families in California, I think in the 90s, they actually preferred that even in their household, they would just speak English in order to assimilate to the mainstream culture and also wanting to the children to excel. And I remember there's a good book that could also help you about that. It's called The Story of Rodriguez. I think it's an autobiography. Some of you may have read it. And when I saw that, but there are consequences of doing that. My argument here is it is okay to learn English knowing that given the construction of the world right now, which is dominated by the North and the West, when they are not out of the gate, it is okay English, like it's a bad thing. But the only problem I have is when our languages are totally erased, and because they are what I called elsewhere the endangered species, right? So I would in a country like obviously Brazil has its own dynamics as well. In a country like South Africa, I'll propose that depending on the province where you are, there should be at least 4 languages actively used. And to do that, you are actually encouraging even those who see the language as inferior to begin to say this a language is somebody's identity. I mean, if you look at the language as inferior, you're actually telling people that their identities are inferior. Basically, that's what you say, right? It's just like talking about people's neighborhood to say that your neighborhood is dangerous, you're full of disease. You're probably saying that these people are not safe. I'm sorry to use the word these, right? So I'm thinking of, there's a scholar whose name is Bogamba. Bogamba, he at the University of Urbana-Champaign, he wrote a really good piece, and I use it in my work about language, that he actually debunked the concept of English as a superior language in the rest of Africa. He said that there are other languages that if we are serious to implement them, to say that they have to be part of the parliament, they have to be part of schools, then we should be able to come with other languages, right? So, and it's not the radical say, well, we don't want Portuguese, we don't want English. It's a way to say that we've been colonized for a long time. How about we begin then to decolonize ourselves? One of the things I do when I do my own research with Black parents, I go through university in English and everything, because in order for it to pass at the university, I have to do that. But when I go straight to the field, I just say all this in Zulu, and I sit down with parents some of them will say, well, here's a consent form. And they say, what's that? We don't need that. We just want to talk with you, right? So there are other ways that our cultures, the way of knowing could be there. So, and some parents they have a legitimate concern, because even now when you look at the BISA ratings, you know, those numbers are, you know, I don't, I'm not going to say one way or the other about, because a lot of people like those, but I don't know who makes those decisions, who says that this is a marker that says the school is good because of this. But how about schools that do not have those resources or a certain language to do that? Professor, if I need to, I don't know if I can answer your question. I can just bubble around it and and then stop.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
it's a discussion that we need to have always. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we need to
Exactly. Thank you.
improve, but we are together. Yeah, Joel. We are
Absolutely.
together
Obrigado.
in this fight. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
obrigado. Yeah.
De nada.
Obrigado, Ivanete. Carolina, you're next. Agora é sua vez.
Professor Dimandi, thank you very much. It was really inspiring to, through your letter, through your eyes, right? And to see that although share so much in common, right? And watching the parts of the film, it reminded me of a very recent film, The Second Mother, here in Brazil. It's called A Que Horas Ela Volta. The relationship who babysits and works in the house of the more privileged people, and you know, leave their her own child to take care of someone else's child. And well, I would like to ask you, how did the teaching of English take place where you went to school? And do you consider it has changed into a more liberatory way of teaching such an hegemonic language?
Mhm. So, Professor Gomez, are you at UFI?
I was an undergraduate there at UFI.
Okay. Okay.
Now I'm a teacher for elementary schools, public schools here in Brazil.
Yeah, no, well, that's great. So I like your question too, that, you know, and also the examples that you said earlier about what you learned, you saw on the film, you see that the similarities there. So thank you for paying attention on those. So to answer your question, to start with the first one, the reason I'm still struggling with my English is because when I was at school under apartheid, I went through what is called Bantu education, and I will type it in here. I went through what's called Bantu education, and under apartheid, they will give you only 30 minutes a day to study English and like to create sentences, just 30 minutes. And then on Wednesday, I think on Monday, Tuesday, 30 minutes, and then on Wednesday or Thursday, you get out of things. But of our English teaching wasn't more to show us how what it means to talk English to be in a critical way. So it was just like, read this comprehension test, the comprehension, is it called comprehension? You'll read a little story. I think that's the comprehension assignment. Read a story and then answer the following questions, right? So, and then over the, first of all, you got to understand the story. But the problem about that, all those books, I'm sorry to Professor Windle, he's in the room, but I remember one of the books was set in Melbourne, right? I forgot its title. So, and they was talking about all these things about, you know, what's going on in there, but it didn't have my context, right? Some of the books were set about the United States and all this. So, and including those of us who have taken TOEFL. I remember when I was coming to the US, and I know I'm digressing, but I'm trying to make a connection. I had to take TOEFL, and one of the questions they asked, they show us a little comprehension exercise, and they talk about apples, and then they talk about musician performing at the Big Apple, blah blah blah. And then one of the question was, out of 4 states, which one is the Big Apple? And I didn't know which the Big Apple was, right? So you have to have the context. So our English did not have that context, that if I read a book about Johannesburg, about the township, about that in English, then, you know, it's the same thing that about a South African bridge, that I may be walking through it, going to school, as opposed to singing about the London work. So that was my education of English. And in college, I did not, for the first time in college, I could listen to a professor talking perpetually in English, and I did not understand. Because in the township, it were Black teachers, they will talk in English and then say this in Zulu for us to understand bit, but not like perpetually in English. So I had to rely on middle class Black friends who knew, who could tell that. So it was horrible, and still is. If you are an English speaker, you're listening to me talk, you will tell that I do not know how to speak English. But the second one, has it changed? I should say that my work is in curriculum. We have made some partial victories in terms of making curriculum, but the curriculum is still neoliberal, right? It's still not asking serious questions about what it means to coexist, what it means to be in a country that has so much wealth. How could we talk about that in curriculum or even in economics? So, but I haven't looked specifically on English or English teaching in the post-apartheid South Africa. I've just looked at the overall framework. But what I can tell you though is private schools, public, affluent public schools, like my nephew to a public school fluent, because my sister is a school teacher and she could afford to take him there. Those are the Black children who could talk, who could understand English more fluently, and probably do other things with it. So, but not those who attended school like me. So even to this day, yeah. And Professor Gomez, I'm so sorry. I don't know if I answered you, but I tried. Your questions are very hard. Everybody asks
No,
a hard
you did, and you shouldn't say your English is no. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Gomez.
Gente, eu não sei se tem mais algum comentário ou pergunta. Se tiver, podem se manifestar aqui no chat. E eu acho que eu vou passar a palavra para a professora Miriam, antes da gente encerrar. Just checking if there are any more questions or comments, and if not, I will hand over to Professor Miriam Jorge to maybe say a last word before we sign off.
And I have one question for Professor Daniel, just to find out if he's still here real quick, to find out which department at UCT and which professors that he worked with, if you're comfortable sharing with me.
Oh, definitely. I'm a professor at the Department of Modern Languages, teaching English.
Okay.
English at the undergraduate level, and Portuguese, of course, in graduate level, at the University of São Paulo, USP.
Oh, so you're in Sao Paulo?
Yeah, I'm actually in Belgium now, in Brussels, but
okay.
I usually I'm usually
sorry for asking, yeah,
in São Paulo. No, I'm doing my postdoctorate here, but I'm from São Paulo. Yes. So I work with future English teachers. Yeah. I'd like to invite you for my seminars, okay? I will send you an email.
I'll accept. I've already accepted. But Professor Daniel, I want to find out, you went to University of Cape Town, which is, we call it UCT. You were invited there to talk about Paulo Freire. I was just wondering which department did you go to?
Okay, it was Western Cape. Western Cape University, and the invitation came from Professor Zani Bock. She works with multilingualism, and Christopher Stroud. So they've been working with literacies as well, but multilingualism and very interesting work.
Thanks. I hope you enjoyed, because the University of Western Cape is one of the progressive universities in South Africa. So I hope you had a good visit there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Obrigado. Yeah.
Danielle, no stealing the Monday.
I already accepted the invitation.
That's okay.
Just give to Professor Danielle my email address, please.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Miriam, over to you.
So, yes, I'm never very good with these words, but I'd really like to thank you, Dr. Dimandi, for today's presentation, the conversation, all the questions and answers that we had today from participants were just other pieces of a puzzle that we have been working hard on, not to solve, but also to act upon a better picture in this puzzle in terms of equality, educational equality, and embracing multiple literacies. And so thank you. I'd like to remind we still have 2 events ahead of us. And the conversations, I hope that we can, by the end of this first series that we are planning together, that we will have a bigger, not just perspective, but a broader view of what it means to discuss inequalities, education, and transliteracy. So thank you for everybody participating here today. Thank you, Dr. Dimandi. We have today the participation also from students from not only AMSL, the University of Missouri, but the University of Texas A&M. Yes, and Dr. Barbosa, who is a partner too, who's been collaborating and who's been working with the education of Mexican American students in the Latino population and participating in this dialogue with us. So thank you so much. I hope you'll have a chance to continue talking. And as I said last time, we não estamos, estou agradecendo doutor Dimandi e agradecendo a presença dos estudantes, dos participantes, lembrando que nós temos participantes da Texas A&M, em Corpus Christi, também hoje conosco, e novamente eu digo, é uma pausa, não é bem um encerramento, porque temos muito a conversar. Obrigada a todos e todas.
Okay, thanks again, Demande. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Pedro, for doing the translations. Danielle helping out as well with that. And next on our list of guests is Miriam Jorge, right? So don't miss our next meeting.
Yes.
Miriam is our special guest. Próxima vez é com Miriam. Então, até lá. E vocês podem ter acesso também aos textos do Demand que ele compartilhou. Tem uma pasta no Drive que eu coloquei no chat, mas eu vou mandar por e-mail também para todo mundo. See you all next time. Thank you so much, everybody.